last week. WTI here down to $83.70 a barrel, and that is a Bloomberg Business Flash. Let's get to sports with Dan Schwartzman in New York. Dan.
All right, Brian, let's get to the Champions League group stage matches. Bayern Munich setting a record 16 straight group stage wins and 37 without a loss. They knocked off Galatasaray 3-1. Inter Milan a 2-1 win over Salzburg. Napoli gets past FC Union Berlin 1-0. Real Madrid a 2-1 win over Braga. How about Manchester United finally pulling off a group stage win? Harry Maguire at the goal in the 72nd minute. They beat Copenhagen 1-0. Arsenal took them past Sevilla 2-1. Major League Baseball does not get much better than this. NLCS game number 7 tonight in Philadelphia. 8:07 p.m. Eastern time, first pitch. Phillies and Diamondbacks. Winner moves on to the World Series to face the Texas Rangers. Rangers Suarez on the hill for the Phillies. Brandon Pfaadt for the Arizona Diamondbacks. Well, a move in the National League West. Bob Melvin has left the San Diego Padres as manager and has now taken over the San Francisco Giants. San Diego had granted Melvin permission to interview with the Giants earlier in the week. NBA regular season gets underway tonight. Tip-off in less than 1 hour in Denver as the Nuggets are hosting the Los Angeles Lakers. The late game tonight, it's a good one. It's the Phoenix Suns. They are on the road taking on the Golden State Warriors. Well, Denver is a 5-point home favorite in their matchup with LA. The Warriors a 2.5-point home favorite against the Phoenix Suns. I'm Dan Schwartzman. That's your Bloomberg World Sports Update. Brian, back to you.
Dan, thanks very much. Yeah, let's get to Angelo Zeno, Vice President, Senior Equity Analyst at CFRA Research. We wanted to take a broader look at tech earnings. Angelo, talk first maybe about Alphabet. A lot of attention on the cloud there. I mean, I think if you're an investor in Alphabet, you know that a big part of the business is ad-based. And if you're worried about a slowdown in the economy, that might suffer a little bit. So you're looking for strong cloud numbers, and they didn't get them.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. I mean, you're looking at growth of about 22%, right, year over year. Expectation, in our view, was probably about 26 to 28%. At least that's what we were looking for. So definitely a strong acceleration also from what we saw in the first half of the year, which was closer to stronger. So absolutely a disappointment. And you're right in the sense that the growth story everyone is kind of looking at right now across some of these mega cap names is clearly on the cloud side of things because of some of the AI opportunities out there, and also given the belief that the cloud should be able to kind of hold up much better in kind of amid macro uncertainty. And to your point, it was a big disappointment for Alphabet.
So do you think, generally speaking, when it comes to cloud, that there's still a lot of hype baked into some of these stocks?
I wouldn't necessarily say hype. I mean, when we kind of look at Alphabet specifically, right, I mean, I think it's trading about 16, 17 times our estimate for calendar 2025. I know that's kind of looking out a little bit, but I mean, we're essentially almost into calendar 24 right now. So, when you kind of look at a lot of the multiples out there, whether it be Alphabet, whether it even be a name like Microsoft, which is kind of around 24, 25 times our calendar 25 estimate, we don't think there's a lot of hype in those type of names at all. But you kind of look at the numbers here, specifically again to your point on the cloud side of things. Microsoft actually saw an acceleration on the cloud growth side of things, so it is definitely spurring some concern out there that Alphabet could potentially maybe not be as positioned as well amid kind of the AI frenzy out there, and it could potentially even be losing some share right now.
I think we have to put it in context, though. Alphabet stock had been up a lot lately, and Microsoft had actually been stumbling, so that's one thing to think about. But Microsoft also, as you mentioned, with AI, has a unique position because it not only gains it actually gains on both sides of the AI equation, because it can benefit directly from advising companies, and then it can actually use AI to what all the other companies will do, which is to, increase their productivity.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, in the kind of the big sense of AI, I mean, it's essentially intended to be a productivity tool, at least kind of in its early days, right? And Microsoft is absolutely kind of better positioned, I'd say, than anyone else out there, given that they've got the largest installed base on the Office side of things. And, we know Copilot is launching next week. And, we do think that's going to help kind of be a really good contributor for Microsoft on the Office side of things. If you actually look at the numbers for Microsoft Office 365 commercial grew about 18% here in the September quarter. They're guiding somewhere in kind of the mid-high teens type level in the December quarter as well. So, higher average selling prices via Copilot is going to help. And, Alphabet does have Workspace, but it's not nearly the type of size that we have, on Microsoft side of things. Alphabet is still more of a consumer-driven type company, given its ad spend tilt as well. So, Microsoft is, clearly better positioned here. We think, outside of NVIDIA, it really is your ultimate AI play at the moment.
I know you're an equity analyst, Angela, but I got to ask you about the influence that rising rates are having. Certainly, there's been a tremendous volatility in the bond market over the last couple of days. Bank of America today was saying that rising rates have made already stretched valuations in big tech names look increasingly expensive. And B of A was saying that big cap tech remains the most crowded trade among fund managers. What is the scenario if the bond market doesn't settle down here, at least in the next 3 or 6 months, and we see rates back up a little bit?
Yeah, no, I think that's really interesting. I mean, at the end of the day, the economy is driven by the consumer, and no company out there is immune from a recession out there. So a rising interest rate environment is clearly going to ultimately put pressure on the consumer and impact these mega cap companies just as much as other companies out there. But from a fundamental perspective, these companies are no doubt better positioned than most of the other names across the S&P 500. It's why they've held up so well this year, whether it be their balance sheets kind of providing more of a safe haven out there, or whether it be kind of more of their kind of enterprise exposure out there, which should hold up, or cloud exposure as well, which should hold up better during uncertain times out there. But as far as the valuation is concerned, and that's another story out there, but the valuations got hurt really hard in calendar 2022, and when we kind of look at valuations today, they are trading for the most part, if you are looking out, at a discount to historical levels. Now that's expected to be the case because of higher interest rates out there, but we do think kind of when you look at the cash positions of these companies, when you look at the valuations more to 2025 perspective, and our belief that these companies should be able to still grow earnings despite some macro uncertainty out there, the valuations are still reasonable for most of these mega cap tech names.
So let's get a report card real fast. We mentioned that Microsoft gained in after hours and Alphabet was down. TI was down as well. How do you rate the earnings that you've seen from the tech so far?
Yeah, listen, I think that maybe to your point that you kind of alluded to earlier, there's definitely some kind of, there was some high sentiment, or, there was definitely some enthusiasm going into the print for a number of these companies like an Alphabet, despite the fact that they did beat, right? And, so we kind of look at it, they rate this right now as, Microsoft is the best position out there.
Okay, and good point. You made the point, Angela. Thank you. Angela Zeno, Vice President, Senior Equity Analyst at CFR. This is Bloomberg.
Now, your 3-day weather forecast on Bloomberg 960.
It'll become partly to mostly cloudy at times, passing fog, especially for the North Bay by morning. Low temperature 45 to 55. Breezy cool weather on Wednesday, 65 to 70 across the area, with increasing afternoon clouds. Breaking clouds at night, followed by mostly sunny, breezy, cool weather Thursday and Friday. Temperatures up between 60 and 70 both afternoons. This is Gary Best with your 3-day weather forecast on Bloomberg 960.
Wherever your business takes you, Bloomberg 960 is here with you.
Breaking economic news crossing the Bloomberg.
Powered by 2,700 journalists and analysts.
Well, let's get to some of the day's gainers.
In more than 120 countries around the world.
We are seeing a flatter picture for European stocks this morning.
We're the only 24/7 global business radio platform.
This market regime is going to come with more volatility.
Bloomberg 960 and 103.7 FM HD2.
The world is more complex than ever, but that complexity pushes me to look at the bigger picture. I'm Emily Chang, and I cover tech, culture, innovation, and the future of business for Bloomberg. At Bloomberg, reporters like me dig into the context of a story so you understand how it impacts you. Because context changes how you see things, how you change things. Context changes everything. Start watching my shows and
technologies at Stryker, a $100 billion U.S. medical device company. He's also an engineering graduate of New Jersey Institute of Technology and a strong advocate for hands-on training.
If you look what NJIT's done with the opening of the makerspace laboratories where students get more hands-on practical experience, the 3D printing, water jet gutting, machining in action, using high-tech quality coordinate measuring machines to inspect parts, giving that student even more value than ever before. So I think NJIT with the disciplines and the ways that the disciplines are broken down, access to labs, access to research, and now access to hands-on, I think NJIT in fact is going to be a leader in that area, and I think NJIT students are even more desired by industry than ever before.
NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology. Learn more at njit.edu.
Bridge Bank knows the ins and outs of business ups and downs by providing flexible financial solutions to business owners of small to mid-sized companies across a variety of industries throughout the Bay Area. Bridge Bank is deeply rooted in the business community and part of a network of professional service providers, business managers, trusted advisors, and entrepreneurs. Visit bridgebank.com. Be bold. Venture wisely. Bridge Bank, a division of Western Alliance Bank, member FDIC.
Bloomberg Radio, on demand and in your podcast feed.
On the latest edition of the Wall Street Week podcast, a conversation with Fed Chair Jay Powell. How could the economy be this resilient given all of its rate hikes?
We certainly have a very resilient economy on our hands. We've got the economy growing strongly. If you think back a year, many forecasts called for the U.S. economy to be in recession this year. Not only has that not happened, growth is now running for this year above its longer run trend. So that's been a surprise, driven largely by consumer spending, driven by a very strong job market with people getting jobs with first high nominal wages, and then as inflation has come down, real wages, which is spurring spending. And we've also had inflation coming down. So, it really is a story of much stronger demand. There may be some ways in which the economy is less affected by interest rates. It's hard to know precisely, but for example, many companies, any company with bond market access will have termed out its debt, right? And therefore may not be feeling the effects of higher rates. The same may be true of homeowners who have a long-term fixed rate, low rate mortgage, who then are therefore not, because it's not an adjustable rate or a higher rate, they're not feeling that increase in rates. So the economy may be somewhat less susceptible to the effects of rate increases. On the other hand, if you look at interest-sensitive spending, these are very much the places where we expect to see and do see effects.
Hear the full conversation on the latest edition of the Bloomberg Wall Street Week podcast. Subscribe on Apple, Spotify, and anywhere else you get your podcasts. Plus, listen anytime on the Bloomberg Business app and Bloomberg.com.
Equity space today, we rebounded following some bullish forecasts earlier in the day. A lot of blue chip names here. We're talking Verizon, 3M, and GE. And then earnings news after the bell kind of muddied the waters just a bit. On the positive side, Microsoft with stronger than expected first quarter sales. The boost here came from a recovery in the cloud computing growth. Microsoft shares right now up by 4%. However, Alphabet reported cloud revenue below estimates, and those shares right now are down a little more than 6%. So look at the regular session. Up across the board with the S&P rising 0.7%, NASDAQ comp today higher by 0.9%, and the Dow was up about 0.6%. The E-mini futures contracts now for the American market down just a bit in terms of the S&P and the NASDAQ 100, and that obviously would reflect the weakness that we've just mentioned in shares of Alphabet. Mixed day for the bond market. We had yields at the longer end of the curve moving a bit lower. The 10-year was down about 2 basis points, so we're at 4.82% as we get set for trading in Tokyo. But at the shorter end, Yields were actually higher. The 2-year jumped about 6 basis points to 5.11. Elsewhere, we had crude oil moving lower, breaking below 84 the barrel. Yes, we've been talking about the tightness in the oil market. That seems to have slackened just a bit. And then if you look at the developments in the Mideast, the war between Israel and Hamas seems so far, for the time being, to be contained. Right now we're trading 83.77 in WTI. We'll take another look at markets on the other side of the top of the hour. Let's get to the media review. Brian is in Hong Kong. Brian?
Doug, the Nikkei newspaper says a great military purge is underway in China. The SAMP, South China Morning Post here in Hong Kong, the main English paper, says China sacks the missing defense chief Li Shangfu with no explanation. And the Washington Post calls it the latest in a string of high-level purges of the Chinese military. It says these purges are apparently related to an investigation into weapons procurement. U.S. officials, and we've reported this all along here at Bloomberg, U.S. officials have said that Li's disappearance is related to corruption charges that were probably connected to his previous position as head of military procurement. So that's obviously one of the really big stories in the press. And the other one is right through state media, the legislature approving this plan to raise the fiscal deficit ratio for 2023 to about 3.8% of GDP. Now that's well above the 3% that was set back in March. And the plan includes issuing additional sovereign debt worth about $1 trillion yuan, $137 billion for the fourth quarter, where the funds would support disaster relief and also construction. Now, as we mentioned in our reporting, China rarely does this. It rarely adjusts the budget mid-year. And in another rare sign of trying to shore up the economy and financial markets, President Xi, along with Vice Premier He Lifeng and some other government officials, made the first known visit to the People's Bank of China that happened. We think that's Xi's first time to do so, about a decade ago. Now, in the Financial Times, Martin Wolf writes that politics is what poses the biggest threat to economic growth in China. He says China needs to manage the shift to a more balanced economy and sustain the relationship between the communist state and the capitalist economy. And then finally, on CNBC, Walter Isaacson, the biographer of Apple co-founder Steve Jobs, said that he thinks Apple is the company that will find it the most difficult to decrease its reliance on China. Doug?
All right, Brian, thank you. We're getting ready for the top of the hour. The action will begin in Sydney momentarily. It looks like it could be a positive day for Australian equities after a push higher for U.S. stocks. And in about an hour from now, Tokyo and Seoul will join trading. We'll also have trading in U.S. sovereign debt when the Tokyo session gets underway. Hour 2, DBA, it starts right now.
24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com and the Bloomberg Business app. This is KNEW Oakland, KOSF 103.7 FM, HD2 San Francisco.
This is Bloomberg Daybreak Asia for this Wednesday, October 25th in Hong Kong, Tuesday, October 24th in New York. Coming up this hour, shares in Alphabet decline after the company's cloud unit reports quarterly sales below expectations. Microsoft posted stronger than expected revenue as cloud computing growth recovers. And China steps up support for the economy as President Xi Jinping makes an unprecedented visit to the PBOC. Former Trump Chief of Staff Meadows ran for immunity. Hammer drops out of speaker race. U.S. Secretary General calls for Israel to stop bombing Gaza. Israel asks for him to resign. I'm Ed Baxter with Global News.
The Phillies and Diamondbacks battle for a trip to the World Series. I'm Dan Schwartzman. I'll have that story and more coming up in Bloomberg Sports.
That's all straight ahead on Bloomberg Daybreak Asia. On Bloomberg 1130 New York, Bloomberg 99.1 Washington, D.C., Bloomberg 106.1 Boston, Bloomberg 960 San Francisco, Sirius XM 119, and around the world on BloombergRadio.com and via the Bloomberg Business app.
DBA, the Wednesday edition. 10 in the morning in Sydney, we do have action in Australian equities. And if you're joining from anywhere in the Asia Pacific, good morning. I'm Beck Prisner at the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio in New York. Let's kick things off with a look at market action. Brian is in Hong Kong. Brian?
Thanks very much, Doug. Asian equity futures are announced from Beijing yesterday, and also President Xi Jinping's overall stepped-up support for the world's #2 economy. So as mentioned, in addition to Hang Seng Index in futures rallying, FTSE China 50s are up about 2%. And the currency, the offshore Chinese currency, at 731.34 against the greenback. The dollar was a little stronger, dollar yen here, 149.87. Now it's time for global news.
He repeatedly says he told Trump that the claims of election fraud were baseless. The House speakership has been thrown into more disarray. That was quick. Number 3, down and out. Tom Enner has dropped his bid for Speaker. Early in the day, he reportedly was 26 votes short as well. Donald Trump came out in opposition. Now, former House Speaker Kevin McCarthy says the core problem here is just not being addressed.
You don't deal with the consequences of the work with all the Democrats who put it in here. Putting a new person up each time, we're going to be in the same place we were before.
So what you have within the party is the Trump supporters who will not vote for anybody who voted to certify the 2020 Electoral College and those who did not. And Bloomberg's Wendy Benjaminson says the effort to get the Democrats to get a speaker elected doesn't seem like that will happen.
What benefit Democrats at this point to join the fight or to try to solve the fight for the Republicans? There's an old political adage, you know, that when your enemy is drowning, throw him an anchor, or just watch. And I think at this point, I mean, the scroll of concessions that Republicans would have to make to Democrats to get them on board right now is impossibly long.
So the mess is messier and hopefully doesn't get messiest. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres says Israel needs to pull back from its bombing campaign, and Gaza says while Hamas attacks were unwarranted,
it is important to also recognize the attacks by Hamas did not happen in a vacuum. The Palestinian people have been subjected to 56 years of suffocating occupation.
Now, Israeli ambassador to the UN, Gilad Erdan, says Guterres needs to step down.
Mr. Secretary General, the UN was established to prevent atrocities, to prevent such atrocities, like the barbaric atrocities that Hamas committed. But the UN is failing.
While the air attacks persist, their efforts by the U.S. and other Israeli allies to try and do everything before going in. Bloomberg's Oliver Crook in Tel Aviv says today even
dropping flyers on Gaza saying basically that if you have any information with phone numbers and all this, and this sort of thing about where hostages may be being held, offering money, saying that there will be safe passage and trying to assure the safety of those who basically have any information on where these hostages are being held within Gaza.
And the Pentagon is sending Israel the U.S. Army's 2 batteries of Iron Dome radar, command post, and interceptors to boost the nation's air defense. Former Trump fixer Michael Cohen on the stand today in the New York civil suit into Trump valuations. Cohen testifying that he followed Trump's orders, as did the rest of the team. Trump going into court. And Cohen?
This is not about Donald Trump versus Michael Cohen or Michael Cohen versus Donald Trump. This is about accountability.
The judge will make the determination in the suit. Global news 24 hours a day, and when